This is Jihan Al-Farra from Middle East Monitor. And today I'm very delighted to have with me Samia Halaby, who is a leading abstract artist and a very influential scholar of Palestinian art. Samia was born in Jerusalem in 1936, but has lived in the United States since 1951 after her family was forced out of Palestine during the Nakba in 1948. Since then, Samia has actively raised awareness and advocated for the rights of Palestinians through her work and writing, and has become recognized as a pioneer of contemporary abstraction in the Arab world, with her work having been collected by international institutions since the 1970s. This year at Middle East Monitor, we are actually celebrating 10 years since the launch of the Palestine Book Awards, and it is a great pleasure to be discussing with Samia today her book, Drawing the Kafr Qasem Massacre, which won the Palestine Book Awards Creative Prize in 2017. Samia, welcome and very pleased to have you with us.
Thank you so much, and I'm pleased to be with you. How delightful.
Samia, you've employed in a very compelling way, both textual narrative and art, or as you described it, documentary drawing, to tell the story of the Kafr Qasem massacre. I'll leave it to you to tell our audience about Kafr Qasem and what happened there. But, first, my question to you is, I would say, why Kafr Qasem? Palestinians have experienced numerous massacres at the hands of Israeli forces since 1948. And you yourself as a child were forced out of your home in Palestine. So it would be interesting to know why you chose to document this massacre in particular, and who was your intended audience?
The particular cause that brought me to this event as a subject for my work was a young woman, Aisha Amir, who lived in Berlin when I first started putting material on the internet, and she saw my stories about Palestine, and she contacted me, and she could hardly speak English at that point. And of course, I didn't know German. From one thing to the other, we continued, and she was in my studio, and she was part of a highly politicized, energetic push out of the Kafr Qasem to bring attention to the massacre. They had established from the very beginning an annual march in memory of those who were killed there. So it was through her, she pulled me, and her belief was that every artist who's Palestinian should do something about the massacre. So that's how I got started into it. She took me to her village. We visited together. She introduced me to friends and family. She gave me a taste of Kafr Qasem by visiting all her sisters' homes and her brother's home. And from there we continued. I continued.
Well, in the book, you've tried to capture and document, these painful and brutal events through visual art, and it can't have been easy. So can you maybe tell us about the process of putting the book together and drawing these pictures? What kind of material or data did you rely on to visualize the events that you've captured with your drawings, and how long did it all take you to finish the book? Also, how it felt as well, and if you found this process difficult.
I did find the process difficult, but also when I was in Palestine at one point for a period of 3 months, I started going more often to Kafr Qasem and started making small sketches. And as I worked, I had more questions, and I had a curiosity growing and a fascination developing with finding out more and more and more. The reason this happens is because in Kafr Qasem themselves, they're trying their best to document, to remember, to bring up the new generation, and to teach them about what happened and make them, by that way, make them more aware of how to deal with the occupation and with the terrible stress and that's applied to the village by Israeli forces and powers that are. Um, so that is exactly how I started, and it was 1999 when I first started, and the first part of the first early drawings happened at that year. In 2006, on the 50th anniversary, curator Maimuna Farhat suggested I make it part of an exhibition we were having here in New York. And so I did another set of drawings that were huge, and it was then that I conceived the idea that a book should be made. So this book came out on the 60th anniversary, and it was a very important process. So it took me, in a way, 14 years to accomplish this project. And indeed, the book is hard to classify. It is a creative project. I'm telling the story, but it's not anthropology. I'm in the village. I'm Palestinian myself. I understand what they're feeling and what they're going through to some extent. And so there is a personal connection there. First of all, to trusting them, to accepting that they're telling the truth and not to demonize them. And it was a very painful situation for them. It was very painful to talk about and to remember. And they wanted their story told, but they also did not want to expose the details at the same time because it was painful. So it's not really an art book. It is an art book. I discuss art, and I really wanted to do it from the point of view of respect. I had to respect, since their intention was to teach the new generations, I had to respect the new generations and how they would see their parents and their parents' experiences. I didn't want them to be seeing piles of dead bodies and disrespect and blood and gore. I wanted them to see what bravery and heroism there was in Sumud. And as to this, sorry.
No, carry on. I was wondering if you have pictures, because I know you have pictures that maybe you'd like to show our audience as well, just because we're obviously talking about a very visual book and a very visual story. So I think it'd be great for our audience to also see some of the pictures that you have, in the book.
Yes, if we could look at that, and it would also help answer the sources question, what sources I used. First of all, as we look at the cover, I want to thank again the designer Henk van Essen, who amazingly knew about massacres of villages in Northern Europe from his own parents' experience in the Second World War. And so he put his heart and soul into this book and into bringing out, can we see the inside pages where he helped me, can we see the second slide, not the inside pages, where he followed the example set by Kafr Qasem themselves, and we put in the inside of the front cover and back cover pictures of all of the martyrs. And where there were no pictures of them, we took fragments of my drawings. And in these next, you see these are indicate one of the sources I used, which was a magazine published in Kafr Qasem itself called Al-Shuruq. And the October issue, since the massacre took place in October, the day that Israel, France, and Britain had started a war against Egypt and wanting the Suez Canal under their own control for their own uses. So Majd Sarsour, who published this, was a great source of information. And also there were interviews with people. We'll see an interview written by hand by Latif Dori, and after this slide, but this slide shows work done by the people at the Kafr Qasem Museum, who showed a map of where the massacre took place and where all the events of the massacre took place. The book is in three sections. The next slide shows part 3, where I'm showing all the covers of Al-Shuruq magazine. And here in the yellow pages that passed, you see the handwritten documentation of interviews in 1956 of Latif Dori, who visited the people in jail, so in the hospital, wounded in the hospital, I'm sorry. The situation was horrific at the time, and no news was allowed to pass in or out. Nobody was allowed to pass in and out. There was a complete uh, silence placed and on threat of imprisonment on all people to talk about the massacre. And there was a military cordon around this village that no one could go in and out. And so the massacre itself became, the drawings themselves became for me an effort to be a camera, to pretend that I was there, since no pictures survive of the massacre, and to try and document what I saw. This was one of the first events of the massacre, where some shepherds were coming home and were shot, and this was the unnumbered, not numbered, this is pre the first one. The whole system was created by Emil Habibi, our wonderful historian. This is what it was listed as the first. Can we have the bicycles again, Jihad? Next slide, Jihan. Yes, can you? I'll say next slide, Jihan. Okay, that would be much clearer.
Yeah.
And this is what Emil Habibi listed as the first wave of killing. There had been two others inside the village. And when Aisha introduced me to her friends in Kafr Qasem, Rose Amer and Hakim Rabia, I began to communicate with them, and they helped me figure out for example, they criticized the way the handlebars were on the bicycles. I was trying my best to be as accurate as possible historically. And then the next one, I show the village. Next slide. I show the third wave of killing, which was a young boy whose name is Fathi, and his father Uthman is in the distance. The truck parked on the side is from the fourth wave of killing. Fathi was a 12-year-old boy bringing home a herd of 100 or so sheep that were black in color. And the weapons which I investigated also were the Bren and Uzi and a rifle. The Bren is in the middle. It's a war, something sold to Israel by the British. It was used in the Second World War. It stood on a tripod, and the soldiers had to lie down on the ground and aim it. So you see, weapons that were intended for war were being used against unarmed civilians, tired, coming back home quickly. Next slide will show some of the help that I received from the Kafr Qasem people in Kafr Qasem. The sketch on the left shows Fathi falling down, face down, and I wondered, how does a boy fall? You know, what happens to a human body shot and just collapses? And I went through the web trying to look for dead bodies to see what it all looks like. And I found piles of dead bodies. They were like garbage on street corners. But I did not find any videos or movies of individuals actually being shot and how they fell. So, but Kafr Qasem friends said, no, why is he kneeling to the soldiers? And then I realized that that was a message in the drawing, so I took a heavy eraser on the finished drawing, and then I used an image of the child falling backwards. And the next one of this third wave, you see the father, and you see, first of all, way at the top, the soldiers shooting at the boy, and he's fallen dead on the ground. And the soldiers are tiny or not present in my drawings, because the story is not about them. It's about the heroism and bravery of the people trying to survive, workers coming home from work, trying to survive a really horrific situation. And here the sheep, of course, turn around and stampede, and the father has not yet seen what happened to his son. He's busy trying to stop the herd. And in the fourth wave, which drawing is on the back, you see that truck on the fourth wave on the right. And here it is one man who had only sight in one eye tried to dash into the back of a truck to get into it to be safe. And they killed him. I used here the Hatta Wagali as a kind of halo falling off of his head. And at the same time, the composition is like a wheel with spokes centering around his torso. In the next slide, I show Abu Musa, who ran out in front of the truck and into its headlights. But here he's drawn not directly in the headlights. I know there are certain artistic distortions or liberties I took. And he was yelling at the Jeep, "Stop, stop, where are my two sons?" And in so doing, he delayed the Jeep long enough to allow the truck full of workers to escape. And in the sixth wave, you will see the boys coming home from work on bicycles. Mostly they had been working in the quarries around Kafr Qasem, quarries that, of course, belong to Israeli companies, and you see two of them had arrived on a cart and the rest on bicycles, and they line them up and begin shooting them. But because they're young, a sufficient number of them.
Hello? Samia, are you still with us? Can you hear me, Samia?
Hi, are you hearing me? I can't hear you.
Yes, it's back.
I think we lost you for a bit. Yeah,
Okay.
it's coming on. I think I can hear you very well now.
All right. If you can get the slides back on. Was it my connection that went out?
Yeah, I believe so, because your voice cut out and the camera sort of froze.
Okay.
But we can hear you fine now. Yeah.
Great. Okay. On the seventh wave, which is the next slide, I tried my best to capture, and in all of them, if you'll see at the bottom, there's the name of each person, both English and Arabic. So I was trying my best to also in the faces, wherever I had a picture, make it resemble the person. And there were events here. There must be as many stories as there are individuals in this wave of killing. But there were three that I interviewed and was concerned with because the people, as they talked to me, were telling me about them. And then here I tried to capture the energy, and I knew for a fact that one of the grandchildren said the driver of the truck was his grandfather, and the truck was yellow. So I at least used yellow as a main color here. And in the next slide, you'll see me doing some of the sketching, trying to figure out how to lay it out, the energy, and in some ways, these small little sketches, compared to the huge drawing, are more energetic, but they don't fulfill my wish to be documentary and to name the people individually and to show all of the details. So my purpose here was strictly documentary. And in the next slide, you'll see another sketch, a very early one that was done actually in 1999 when I first was interviewing people, and it's about Jamal and Abdul Rahim. Abdul Rahim gave me an interview, who survived, that is so amazing. It's worth getting the book just to read what he told. Um, he had first refused to be interviewed. It's very painful for him to relive these details. But Jamal was an 11-year-old sent by the mother to bring the brother home. And so here, the 11-year-old, not knowing the perfidy and ill intentions of the Israeli soldiers, the border police on that day declared part of the IDF, uh, uh, were shooting and people had fallen. They lined them up, shot them, they'd all fallen. And Jamal was delighted that he had survived and was shaking his brother to see. He asked, I'm okay, brother, are you still alive? And of course the soldiers see him and they come and they shoot him in the head. And so he had been hugging his brother very tightly. And the brother describes in the interview how he hugged tighter and tighter and hiccuped, and he could then feel him loosening and dying. But the interview continues to tell the remainder of the horrific story of him waking up later, finding his brother's body had been taken away, and later seeing his brother's body in a van in front of a jeep where he was seated, etc. So in the next slide, we see another of the particular stories of the massacre, the story of Abu Ayyub and Abu Farid. Abu Ayyub was the one who was able, many tried to squeeze under the truck of the seventh wave. He was able to get in over the wheel, and then Abu Farid, after almost all the killing had been done, came slowly crawling back, asking, is there room for me under there? Why he came back became an issue for me to think about. It must have been that feeling like such an unbelievable thing had happened to them. He felt he had to be with someone else who survived. But when the soldiers came back, they shot him dead. And the last slide the wave I'm going to describe is the ninth wave, where women were killed. There was a truck coming back quite late, and the soldiers had taken off, resting, smoking, joking, sitting at the head of the well at the school, which is close by. And when the women saw all the bodies scattered on the ground as they entered, and one woman, Safa Sarsour, recognized one of her sons, a 16-year-old boy, killed on the road. His name was Jum'a, I believe. They all started screaming. That woke up the soldiers. They came and they put a huge effort to stop the truck, and they stopped it, and they got them all down, lined them up, killed the men at first with the two boys, and so Safa had to see her second boy being killed. And Emil Habibi described it as a dance of death, but I didn't like to do it as Emil had described it, so I called it Embrace in Death. And the women all were killed except for one in the middle, whose name was Hana Amir, and she survived. And in the next slide, you see my 20. This was done in 1999, but this one was done in 2012 or shortly after, in 2013, as I finished the large drawings. And in this case, I called it implosion, because the women, after they saw the men being killed, and they had begged the soldiers, and they had gathered together when the shooting began, rather than running in all directions. And I wanted very much, and all their names, again, I repeat, are under there. You can identify them one by one. Safar Sarsour is way in the back with her hand on her head. The woman who was nearly in advanced pregnancy is in front, and there is a child dead in the arms of another woman to the right. So the next slide shows the women lined up. I mean, I didn't want to line them up to show them as though they were, I was not interested in how they were lined up by the soldiers. I wanted to line them up to look at them, to study them, to understand more. And in this process, try to understand how they were dressed, what it was like. And again, Safa I put towards the right front with both her hands up. And I interviewed many of their relatives. I interviewed the granddaughter of Rose, the grandmother of Rose Amir, and I interviewed her son. And so all of them are known individuals with portraits from their pictures. And so this was my last attempt at showing. And in the next slide, you will see how much I was sketching and trying. And this was the drawing I exchanged and sent pictures of to Hakim and Rose. And also I wrote to two experts on Palestinian clothing and discovered that Palestinian dress in the villages of the plains was different from the mountains. And so I tried to use that format. Besides which, when I was in Kafr Qasem, though it was 50 years after the fact or 45 years after the fact, I could see the way they carried themselves, the way they moved, how they did their dresses up on their belts, etc. So that the next slide shows the dedication of the book, and so this I will let people read it as we talk a little bit, you and I, Jihan.
Yeah, it is, quite a journey. It must have been quite difficult. As you've said, it is indeed difficult just to sort of, face all of these, testimonies as well. But I feel like as painful as it is, both to, I think, sketch and write, as well as to read, for any of the readers that, pick up a copy of the book, it's important, I believe, to sort of preserve the memories of these individuals that have gone through something like that. How do you feel like the book was received, maybe?
Well, I think the book had a hard time being received, though there were some wonderful, wonderful reviews of the book. But the fact that it's a massacre made it harder for people to want to look through it. And also the fact that I was focusing on the working class might have been the cause for another kind of the stopping of another kind of hope, where the Institute of Palestine Studies had begun working with me to translate it to Arabic, and I was very excited about that. And then when their final jury came to look at it, and I was hearing, and I'd contributed books so that they would sell them to help, and then silence, total silence. And I'm guessing that the fact that I mentioned the Communist Party and the workers and how much the Communist Party was, some of the material, I forgot to say at the beginning, were publications of the Communist Party. So that may have been the cause of why that translation never got done, and silence was offered in place of continued collaboration. But I think the book is important, and it is important in Palestinian history, and it's a documentation. And I have to give a lot of credit to Kafr Qasem people themselves, because there were many massacres where the villagers did not care to really look into it very carefully and make a big deal about it. And in some cases they couldn't. They were scattered refugees, and though they told their story, no one wanted to believe them. And this was not of 1948, this was 56. They were supposedly democratic citizens of the State of Israel. And here is what happened to them. But yes, I think they deserve a lot of credit to tell the story. But remember one thing, it was at the time a village of 1,600 people, no more. That's a small amount of people. And 50 of them approximately were killed. That's 1/30th of the population. So every family was affected. And
Mm.
also there was an attempt at silencing them, and an attempt at turning them, forcing them to do a conciliatory event with the military. The horrors of the situation continue and continue. So if it doesn't, if it stands as a great example of the horrors that happen to Palestinians over and over again.
Samia, before we leave, can I ask you actually what inspired you to pursue art in the first place, and specifically abstract art, as you know, you're very well known for that.
Uh, it's hard to say what makes you want to be an artist. I think many young people in their childhood have an urge to make pictures. I think there are many of us who find communicating visually easier than communicating verbally. Um, we have different, people of different talents. For me, numbers and visual images are easier than words, even though I became a writer later on. And I chose abstract painting because to me it is the most advanced way of thinking about pictures. So to me, there are pictures are of many, many, many types and serve many very important functions. And to just do beauty and enjoy them and repeat what was done in history already, nothing wrong with that. But there are those of us who want to explore the language of pictures. So if you want to explore the language of pictures, you have to explore the language of pictures. You study history and you see how far did we get in history and where are we going. And to me, the most advanced language of pictures was invented at times of working class revolution. That includes the Impressionists, the Soviet suprematists, the American abstract expressionists, and so they're all abstract. And abstraction is very interesting. It doesn't force anyone to make pictures that praise a ruling class. You can
Mm.
explore ideas and forms and patterns in nature. You can be a mathematician. You can explore the nature of space. So it's a much more open world.
And what would you say to maybe young and aspiring Palestinian artists in particular?
Work hard. I think it's important. One of the things that I regret a great deal about uh, uh, what's available to Palestinian youth is education, and they thirst for education, but it is very, very hard to get a clear picture of Palestinian art history, and very hard to get a clear picture and a dignified picture of Arab art history, of Arab art. There is so much misunderstanding of the world of art and the done by Arabs throughout the ages. So those are things that concern me, and that's why I did the book Liberation Art of Palestine, and I'm writing about Arab abstraction, which everybody wants to call decoration, which I think are significant images of the world. So I'm
Mm.
writing about that. It leaks into my writings here and there and everything. It influenced me deeply. So that's why I'm abstract, and my advice is to study history as much as you can, your own history, and don't limit yourself. The world is wide open. Another thing that happens to youth is identity. I think identity
Yeah.
is a propaganda tool. Go hunt your own identity. Well, no, go hunt the history of the entire world. You have a brain, use it and look at Africa, at Asia, at not just at Europe and America. I mean,
Mm.
Japan, India, China have fantastic art histories. Learn about what they did. Learn about what the Arabs did. All of it is important. So, and we can't change who we are. I am Palestinian and I don't want to change it anyway. I don't need to go screaming, I don't need to reconfirm that in everything. It just comes out naturally out of your love. So, yeah, that's where I am
Thank
with it.
you. Thank you so much, Samia. it's been a great pleasure to hear from you directly. And I know that, you know, the book, Drawing the Kafr Qasem Massacre, is available on Amazon, but maybe perhaps you can also tell our audience where else they might find the book.
I think Palestine Books is going to handle it. And in fact, if you go through Amazon, you'll see that the shipper is Palestine Books. So you can get it through Palestine Books as well. They are just now working up their webpage, and they don't have automatic pay methods. But if you're interested in the book and other books they have, you would be able to order and send a check and receive the books.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Samia, for giving us the time. And thank you very much to our audience as well. And with that, we'll leave you and hopefully catch you in another memo conversation next Wednesday.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you so much. Take care. Bye.
You too. Bye.